Have you ever trusted someone so completely that if they told you the sky was green, you probably look up just to make sure? I did. Her name was Olivia Carter. For 15 years, she wasn't just my best friend. She was family. If someone had told me she'd one day destroy my life, I would have laughed. Not because she was perfect, but because I thought I knew her. I didn't. And by the time I learned the truth, everyone already believed I was gone. The detective didn't introduce himself. He didn't shake my hand. He walked into my hospital room, placed a photograph on the bedside table, and quietly asked, "Rachel, can you explain this?" I looked down. First, it didn't make sense. White flowers, rows of folding chairs, my parents sitting in the front, my fourth-grade students holding candles. Then I saw the picture resting beside the flowers. It was me, smiling. The same picture from my school ID. My throat tightened. "What is this?" The detective held my gaze. "It's your memorial service." I felt my heartbeat stumble. "My what?" He nodded slowly. "3 weeks ago. Everyone believed you were dead." I stared at the photograph. Then I noticed someone standing beside my mother. Olivia. Black dress. Red eyes. One arm wrapped around my mom's shoulders. She looked heartbroken. The detective spoke again. "There's only one problem." He leaned forward. "You were still alive. 3 weeks earlier. Life had been wonderfully ordinary. I taught 4th grade at Lincoln Elementary. Every morning started the same. Coffee. Attendance sheets. 23 noisy kids asking impossible questions. It wasn't glamorous, but I loved it. Every Friday after school, Olivia and I met at the same little diner we'd been visiting since college. Same booth. Same waitress. Same terrible coffee. It was our tradition. That Friday, she arrived almost 20 minutes late. Something she never did. She apologized. Said work had been overwhelming. I believed her. Now, I wish I'd paid attention, because for the first time in 15 years, she kept checking her phone. Every few minutes, the screen lit up. She'd read a message, lock the phone, force a smile, and change the subject. "Everything okay?" I finally asked. She looked at me for a second too long, then laughed. "You know my boss. Maybe that's why lies work so well. The best ones always contain a little truth." Before we left, Olivia surprised me. "My uncle finally let me use his cabin." I smiled. "The one by Blackwood Lake?" She nodded. "Let's disappear for the weekend. No grading papers. No phones. No work. Just us." I almost said no. Parent-teacher conferences were Monday. I still had essays to finish. Then she gave me that smile. The one that had talked me into road trips, bad haircuts, and karaoke nights I still regretted. "You deserve one weekend." She was right. I said yes. Looking back, that wasn't the biggest mistake I made. The biggest mistake was believing the trip was her idea. Saturday morning felt perfect. Blue sky, open highway, music turned up too loud. For the first hour, everything felt normal, until Olivia missed an exit. Pointed it out. She barely glanced at the road. "I know. We're taking another route." "Why?" She hesitated. "Less traffic." But there wasn't any traffic. Not a single car behind us. Not one in front. It was a strange answer. Small. Forgettable. The kind of thing you never question. Until much later. 2 hours into the drive, we stopped at a gas station. I went inside to grab coffee. When I came back, Olivia wasn't by the car. She stood near the edge of the parking lot, talking to a man I'd never seen before. The conversation lasted less than a minute. When she noticed me, she ended it immediately. The man climbed into a dark pickup truck and drove away. "Who was that?" I asked. She didn't even look back. "Wrong person." Then she smiled. "Come on. We're wasting daylight." At the time, I let it go. I had no reason not to. After all, I trusted her with my life. I just didn't know I was about to. Less than 8 hours later, I would be running through a forest, bleeding, terrified, while the only person I'd ever called my sister stood perfectly still and watched me disappear into the darkness. And the worst part? She never once called my name. If you've ever looked back on a memory and realized it wasn't ordinary at all, you know the feeling. Nothing changes. The memory stays exactly the same. Only, you finally understand what you were really seeing. That's what happened to me. Only by then, it was already too late. By late afternoon, we reached Blackwood Lake. The cabin looked exactly the way Olivia had described it. Small, quiet, wrapped in tall pine trees. The nearest cabin sat nearly half a mile away. It was peaceful, the kind of place people escaped to when they wanted silence. Or, when they didn't want anyone watching. Olivia parked the car but didn't get out. She just sat there, hands gripping the steering wheel, staring straight ahead. Liv. She blinked, almost like she'd forgotten I was beside her. Oh, sorry. Long drive. She smiled. But it wasn't her smile. It never reached her eyes. Inside, the cabin smelled like old cedar and fresh coffee. Someone had cleaned recently. There were logs stacked beside the fireplace. Fresh groceries in the refrigerator. Even ice already waiting in the freezer. My uncle really prepared everything, I said. Olivia looked around, then quietly answered, "Yeah. He always keeps it ready." Something about that sentence bothered me. Always. I thought she said he barely used the place. It was a tiny inconsistency. Nothing more. At least, that's what I told myself. We unpacked, made dinner, opened a bottle of sparkling water. For almost 2 hours, everything felt normal again. We laughed about college, talked about former classmates, even argued over which movie to watch. If someone had taken a picture of us that evening, they would have seen two lifelong friends enjoying a quiet weekend. Nothing looked wrong. Sometimes, the most dangerous moments are the ones that look perfectly ordinary. Around 7 o'clock, Olivia's phone buzzed again. She looked at the screen. Every bit of color drained from her face. I noticed immediately. Bad news. She locked the phone before I could see the message. Just work. I smiled. Your boss really needs a hobby. Normally, that would have made her laugh. This time, she only nodded, then stood up. I need some fresh air. She stepped onto the porch. I stayed inside. A few minutes later, I walked to the kitchen window. From there, I could see the driveway. Olivia wasn't alone. A dark pickup truck had stopped near the entrance. The same truck from the gas station. The same man. They stood several feet apart, talking quietly, not arguing, not smiling. The conversation lasted less than a minute. Then he handed Olivia a folded piece of paper. She didn't open it. She stuffed it into her jacket. The truck drove away. When she came back inside, I pretended I hadn't seen anything. She acted like nothing had happened. We finished dinner, watched half a movie, talked about completely ordinary things. But something had changed. Not in the room. Inside me. For the first time that weekend, I caught myself wondering, what aren't you telling me? Around 10:30, the power went out. The television died. The lights disappeared. The cabin fell completely silent. I laughed. Perfect timing. Olivia didn't laugh. She stood so quickly. Her chair tipped over. Stay here. Why? I'll check the breaker. She grabbed a flashlight from the kitchen drawer. Without hesitation. Like she already knew exactly where it was. I frowned. You've been here before, haven't you? She froze. Just for a second. Then smiled. A couple of times. It wasn't what she said. It was the fact she'd lied earlier. 5 minutes passed. She hadn't come back. I walked toward the front door. It was slightly open. Cold night air drifted inside. Olivia. No answer. I stepped onto the porch. The flashlight lay on the wooden steps. Still on. Still glowing. But Olivia was gone. Then I heard voices. Low. Calm. Coming from somewhere beyond the trees. One of them was hers. I moved closer. Carefully. Staying in the shadows. The voices became clearer. A man said, "You promised she'd come." Olivia answered so quietly. I almost missed it. I brought her. Then another voice asked the question that changed everything. Does she suspect anything? There was a long silence. So long. I actually thought Olivia wasn't going to answer. Finally, she whispered, "No." My blood ran cold, because at that exact moment, I realized they weren't talking about someone else. They were talking about me. I took one slow step backward. A twig snapped beneath my shoe. The voices stopped. Every single one of them. Then, the words cut through the darkness like a knife. For one frozen second, nobody moved. Not me. Not Olivia. Not the men. Even the wind seemed to disappear. Then Olivia did something I'll never forget. She turned toward the trees. Toward me. Our eyes met. There wasn't surprise in her face. There wasn't panic. There was disappointment. Like she just watched a plan fall apart. She didn't yell my name. She didn't warn me to run. She simply whispered, "Rachel." Almost too quietly to hear. Then one of the men shouted, "Get her." Every instinct took over. I ran. Branches slapped against my face. Loose rocks rolled beneath my feet. My lungs burned before I'd gone 50 yards. Behind me, I heard footsteps. Fast. Organized. Not men blindly chasing someone through the woods. Men who already knew the terrain. They weren't searching. They were hurting me. That thought terrified me more than anything else. They knew exactly where I was going. Before I did, I reached a narrow trail leading downhill. Moonlight barely reached the ground beneath the thick pine trees. I couldn't see more than a few feet ahead. Then, my foot caught on something hidden beneath the leaves. I hit the ground hard. Pain exploded through my shoulder. I forced myself back up. Don't stop. Whatever happens, don't stop. Behind me, a flashlight beam swept across the trees. One voice called out, "Split up." Another answered, "She's heading toward the creek." How did they know that? I'd never been here before. Neither had they. At least that's what I believed. I ducked behind a fallen oak tree, holding my breath, trying to make myself invisible. The footsteps grew louder, closer. Then, they stopped, only a few feet away. One man spoke quietly. "She's not the problem." Another replied, "Then why are we chasing her?" The first man answered, "Because she saw Olivia." My heartbeat slowed for just a second. Not because I felt safe. I saw someone walking alone. Olivia. She wasn't running. She wasn't calling for help. She walked slowly toward the cabin, head down, as if nothing had happened. I wanted to scream, to ask her why, to demand she explain everything. Instead, I followed, keeping my distance, staying behind the trees. As she reached the porch, another vehicle pulled into the driveway. Not the pickup truck. A silver SUV. An older man stepped out. Gray hair. Expensive coat. Confident. Olivia straightened immediately. The man didn't hug her. Didn't shake her hand. He simply asked, "Is it finished?" Olivia looked at the ground. "No." The man's expression hardened. "You told me she wouldn't leave the cabin." "I know. You promised." "I know." He took one step closer. "You've just made this much more complicated." Then, he handed Olivia a small envelope. She didn't even look inside. She slipped it into her pocket. The older man got back into the SUV and drove away. I stood there, hidden behind a tree, trying to understand what I just witnessed. Who was he? Why did Olivia sound afraid of him? And why did he seem more disappointed than angry? It didn't feel like the conversation between criminals. It felt like a conversation between someone giving orders and someone who had failed. I took one cautious step backward. The ground beneath me shifted. A patch of wet leaves slid away. Before I could catch myself, I tumbled down a steep embankment. The world spun. My head slammed against something hard. Then, everything went black. When I opened my eyes again, sunlight filtered through the trees. My head throbbed. My clothes were soaked. Every muscle ached. For a moment, I couldn't remember where I was. Then the memories came rushing back. The cabin. The men. Olivia. I reached for my phone. Gone. My backpack. Gone. Even my jacket had disappeared. Someone had been with me while I was unconscious. They hadn't taken everything. Just the things that could identify me. I struggled to my feet. And that's when I noticed fresh tire tracks leading away from the forest. Only one vehicle had left that morning. The silver SUV. which meant whoever that older man was, he'd returned after I lost consciousness. I followed the tire tracks until they reached the main road. That's when I saw it. A small roadside security camera, mounted outside an abandoned gas station. If it was working, it had recorded every vehicle that left those woods that morning, including the silver SUV. Maybe the face of the man Olivia seemed terrified to disobey. The security camera was still there, covered in dust, bolted above the old gas station. For the first time since I'd opened my eyes in that forest, I felt something that almost resembled hope. If it had recorded the road, then it had recorded every vehicle that left Blackwood Lake that morning, including the silver SUV, including the older man. I crossed the empty parking lot as fast as my aching legs would allow. The station had clearly been closed for years. The windows were boarded. The fuel pumps were wrapped in faded yellow caution tape. Only one small building remained open, a repair garage. An elderly mechanic stepped outside when he saw me. He looked surprised. "You lost. I need to ask you something." I pointed toward the camera. "Does it still work?" He looked up, then shook his head. "Sure does." My heart lifted. "But," he added, "footage deletes every 72 hours. Everything inside me sank. 72 hours. I'd been missing for 23 days. The evidence was gone. The mechanic frowned. "You okay?" I almost laughed. How do you explain 23 missing days to a stranger? Instead, I simply asked, "Did you ever see a silver SUV coming from the lake?" He rubbed the back of his neck. "I see a lot of vehicles. I can't remember one from weeks ago." Then he hesitated. "Actually, there was one thing." I looked up. There was an older guy, nicely dressed. He stopped here that morning. What morning? The morning everybody started talking about the missing schoolteacher. My pulse quickened. What did he do? The mechanic shrugged. "Bought a shovel." "A shovel? Not food. Not gas. A shovel. Anything else?" He asked if anybody had been asking questions about the lake. I felt a chill run through me. "Did you tell him anything?" The old man smiled sadly. "I told him nobody comes around here unless they're fishing." An hour later, I reached the sheriff's office. The receptionist looked at me for nearly 10 seconds before speaking. Then her face turned white. "Oh my God." She stood so quickly that her chair fell backward. You're. I know. I need to speak to whoever handled my case." Within minutes, Detective Daniel Hayes walked into the interview room. He stopped in the doorway. Didn't speak. Didn't blink. He simply stared at me. Finally, he quietly said. I watched him carefully. His expression wasn't shock. It was relief. Real relief. That mattered. People pretending to care usually overdo it. He didn't. He sat down, placed a thick case file on the table. The words on the front hit me harder than anything else that day. Case status. Presumed deceased. My name was written underneath. I need you to tell me everything. So I did. The cabin. The pickup truck. The men. The older man. Olivia. Every detail I could remember. He didn't interrupt once. He simply took notes. When I finished, he closed the file, then looked directly at me. Rachel, everything you just told me doesn't match Olivia's statement. My stomach tightened. What did she tell you? He opened another folder. There are 3 interviews. The first one was given the morning you disappeared. The second, 3 days later. The third, the day your memorial service was held. He slid the papers across the table. They're almost identical. So, he leaned forward. That's the problem. I frowned. I don't understand. He tapped the pages. People telling the truth remember different details every time. They forget things. They correct themselves. They remember new pieces. He paused. But lies, when they're rehearsed, they stay exactly the same. I felt my hands begin to shake. So you think she lied? I think, he said carefully, she memorized a story. He reached into the case file, pulled out a photograph. It showed the trail leading away from the cabin. Orange police markers covered the ground. What do you see? I looked closely. Footprints. Broken branches. Mud. I don't know. He pointed toward the left side of the picture. There are only one set of footprints leaving the clearing. I nodded. So? He looked me straight in the eyes. Olivia told us. She chased after you. Silence filled the room. Then he quietly added, if she had, there would have been too. For the first time, someone wasn't asking me to prove I was telling the truth. Someone had already found proof that Olivia wasn't. Detective Hayes slowly closed the file. Then he asked a question that stopped me cold. Rachel, before this trip, did Olivia ever mention a charity fundraiser at Lincoln Elementary? I frowned. Yeah. We both volunteered there 6 months ago. He nodded once, then slid a photograph across the table. It had been taken at that fundraiser. Hundreds of parents filled the background. Children were laughing. Nothing looked unusual, until he pointed to a man standing behind us. The same older man, from the cabin, smiling directly at the camera. And suddenly, I realized this story hadn't started at the cabin. It had started 6 months earlier. The photograph looked completely ordinary. Children laughing, parents talking, teachers serving lemonade, colorful balloons tied to the fence. Nothing about it suggested it was evidence. Detective Hayes placed the picture between us. Tell me what you remember. I studied it for nearly a minute. I remember the fundraiser. Our school raised money for new classroom computers. I took pictures all afternoon. That's about it. He nodded. I figured. Then he tapped the bottom corner of the photograph. Don't look at your students. Look behind them. I leaned closer. Near the snack stand stood the same older man I'd seen outside the cabin. Gray suit. Expensive watch. Calm smile. He wasn't looking at the children. He wasn't looking at the games. He was watching the school's treasurer, a man named Richard Collins. I frowned. Richard handled all the fundraiser money. Hayes nodded. Exactly. First, I didn't understand why that mattered. Then he slid another photograph onto the table. Same day, different angle. This time, Richard and the older man were standing beside a white delivery van. Richard reached into his jacket. The older man handed him a thick brown envelope. No handshake. No conversation. Just an exchange. Then they walked in opposite directions. I never saw this. You weren't supposed to. Hayes folded his hands. The photographs were never submitted to the school. They stayed on your phone. I looked at him. So how do you have them? He gave a tired smile. Because your principal backed up every teacher's newsletter photos to the school's server. I blinked. So, someone else saw them. He nodded. We think so. I felt a knot forming in my stomach. What happened to Richard? Hayes opened another folder. He disappeared 4 months after the fundraiser. No goodbye. No resignation. Just gone. Everyone assumed he'd stolen the charity money and fled. The police never found him. I looked back at the picture. You're saying the man at the cabin knew Richard? Hayes didn't answer immediately, and said, he asked, did Olivia ever help with the fundraiser? I nodded. She organized the silent auction. He quietly slid one final picture toward me. My breath caught. Olivia, standing beside Richard. The older man was only a few feet away, watching both of them. Not smiling, just watching. For the first time, I stopped thinking about what Olivia had done. I started wondering what she'd been pulled into. Hayes leaned back in his chair. We've spent months believing your disappearance and Richard's disappearance were unrelated. He paused. Now I'm not so sure. The room fell silent. I stared at the photographs again. One memory suddenly drifted back. Tiny. Almost meaningless. At the fundraiser, Olivia had borrowed my phone. I'd been helping one of my students clean up spilled juice. She asked if she could take pictures while I was busy. I'd handed it to her without thinking. 5 minutes later, she gave it back. I never checked what she'd photographed. Detective. I whispered. I think Olivia used my phone. His eyes narrowed. For what? I don't know. But she asked to borrow it. He immediately reached for the case file. When we recovered your phone records, he said slowly, there was something we couldn't explain. He flipped to another page. 3 photographs were deleted from your phone just 12 minutes after the fundraiser ended. My mouth went dry. I never deleted anything. I know. Hayes looked straight at me. Someone else did. A technician knocked on the interview room door. Detective. We finished restoring the deleted files. Hayes stood immediately. He looked at me. Rachel. I think you're about to remember why someone wanted you to disappear. We hurried into the digital forensics lab. The technician enlarged the first recovered image. Children. Parents. Nothing unusual. The second image appeared. Still nothing. Then, the third photograph filled the screen. The room went completely silent. In the background, barely visible through the crowd, the older businessman wasn't handing Richard an envelope. He was handing him a small black ledger. Richard looked terrified. Olivia was standing only a few feet away, looking directly at them. Not surprised. Not confused. As if she'd been expecting the exchange. I realized the truth might be far more complicated than betrayal alone. Olivia Carter is here. The officer's words hung in the room. Detective Hayes and I looked at each other. Neither of us spoke. After everything that had happened, I wasn't sure I was ready to see her. Hayes finally nodded. Bring her in. The interview room felt smaller than before. The clock on the wall ticked loudly. Every second seemed to last forever. Then, the door opened. Olivia stepped inside. For a moment, I barely recognized her. She looked exhausted. Her eyes were swollen. Her hair, usually neat, was tied back carelessly. She wasn't wearing makeup, or the carefully controlled smile she'd always hidden behind. She looked like someone who hadn't slept in days. She stopped the moment she saw me. Her face turned pale. She swallowed hard. I thought you were dead. I stared at her. You held my memorial. Her eyes filled with tears. I know. You told everyone I ran away. I know. You told the police you chased me. Another quiet nod. I know. Every answer sounded the same. Not defensive. Not angry. Just broken. Detective Hayes broke the silence. Olivia. Before we begin, you should know we've recovered the deleted photographs. She closed her eyes, almost as if she'd expected those words. I figured you would. Hayes placed the fundraiser photograph on the table. The man standing behind Richard Collins. Who is he? Olivia looked at the picture, then quietly whispered. His name is Victor Lang. The room fell silent. Hayes wrote the name down. What does he do? She laughed bitterly. If I tell you he's a businessman, I'd be lying. Rachel looked at her. So tell the truth. Olivia finally met my eyes. I don't know everything, but I know enough. She took a slow breath. Victor never threatens people. He doesn't have to. He makes them believe they'll destroy themselves if they don't obey him. Hayes leaned forward. How did you meet him? Olivia hesitated, then answered. My father. I frowned. What? My father worked for one of his companies. He borrowed money. A lot of money. When Dad died, the debt didn't. The room became completely silent. Olivia continued. I spent years paying it. Every month. I thought I was getting closer. Then they changed the amount. They always changed the amount. No matter how much I paid, I still owed more. I looked at Hayes. Neither of us interrupted. Olivia wasn't making excuses. She was remembering, and every memory seemed to hurt. 3 weeks before our trip, she continued, Victor called me. He knew about you. My stomach tightened. What did he want with me? She shook her head. At first, I didn't know. He only asked questions. Where you worked, where you lived, what your routine was. I thought he was trying to scare me, so I lied. I told him I didn't know. She stopped. Tears rolled down her cheeks. But then, he showed me one of your school photographs. The fundraiser. He pointed at Richard Collins and asked, does your friend know what she photographed? My heart started pounding. So he knew. Olivia nodded. Before I did. I didn't even notice Richard in the background. Victor did. Hayes asked quietly. So why the cabin? Olivia covered her face. Because he promised me that if I convinced Rachel to spend one weekend at the cabin, he'd erase every debt my family owed. The words hit me harder than I expected. You traded me, I whispered. She immediately shook her head. No, I thought. They only wanted the photographs. They told me. They just wanted to ask you questions. I swear. I never believed they'd hurt you. For the first time, I believed she meant that. Not because she deserved my trust, but because regret has a sound, and hers couldn't be faked. Hayes slowly closed the folder. Then answer one question. When Rachel ran, why didn't you tell us the truth? Olivia looked down at her trembling hands. When she finally spoke, her voice was almost too quiet to hear. Because Victor called me. Before I reached the police station, he said, if Rachel is alive, your little brother dies next. The room fell silent. No one moved. No one spoke. Then Hayes quietly asked, did you believe him? Olivia looked up. Her expression said everything before the words came. I still do. Before anyone could respond, an officer rushed into the room. Detective, we've got a problem. What happened? The patrol unit we sent to protect Olivia's brother found the apartment empty. Hayes stood instantly. What about the boy? The officer swallowed. The neighbors said. A black SUV picked him up less than 20 minutes ago. Olivia let out a terrified whisper. Oh God. I told you. Victor always keeps his promises. And for the first time, I realized this wasn't just about proving who lied. It was now a race to save an innocent child before Victor decided there were no more loose ends left to erase. Olivia didn't wait for another question. She was already on her feet. My brother. Her voice cracked. We have to find him. Detective Hayes remained calm. Sit down. She stared at him. My brother is gone. I said. He repeated firmly. Sit down. For a second, I thought she was going to ignore him. Then her shoulders dropped. She slowly sat back in the chair. Hayes picked up the phone. Within seconds, every patrol unit in the county was alerted. Roadblocks, traffic cameras, license plate readers. Every available officer was looking for one black SUV. The room became strangely quiet. Nobody had anything left to say. We could only wait. 20 minutes later, Hayes' phone buzzed. He looked at the screen, then quietly sighed. No match. The SUV hadn't appeared on a single highway camera, almost as if it had never left town. Hayes stood and walked toward the evidence board. Photographs covered almost every inch of it. The fundraiser, the cabin, Richard Collins, Victor Lang, Olivia. Then he pinned one more photograph beside them. A smiling 12-year-old boy, Olivia's brother, Ethan. Hayes folded his arms. If Victor wanted leverage, he has it. Olivia buried her face in her hands. This is my fault. I looked at her for a long moment. Part of me wanted to agree. Another part remembered 15 years of friendship. The birthday parties. The late-night phone calls. The hospital visits after my mother died. None of those memories disappeared because she'd made one unforgivable decision. They simply became harder to understand. Then something clicked. I looked back at the fundraiser photograph. Wait. Hayes turned toward me. What? I pointed to the enlarged image. Zoom in on Richard. The technician enlarged the photo again. Richard was holding the black ledger. But that wasn't what caught my attention. His watch. A bright blue wristband was looped around it. I frowned. That wristband. Hayes looked confused. What about it? It wasn't from the fundraiser. Everyone looked at me. I continued. Our school gave every volunteer a green wristband. Parents wore orange. Children wore yellow. But blue. I shook my head. There were only a handful. Hayes narrowed his eyes. Who received blue? I answered without hesitation. School board members. The room went silent. Richard wasn't on the school board. He shouldn't have been wearing one. Hayes immediately called the principal. 5 minutes later, he had his answer. There were exactly 6 blue wristbands. He looked up from his notes. 5 were returned. My heartbeat quickened. And the 6? Never accounted for. A simple plastic wristband, worth less than $1. But suddenly, it mattered. Because someone had used it to move through restricted areas of the fundraiser. Areas where cash donations were counted. Areas where cameras rarely pointed. Hayes looked at Olivia. Did Victor ask you to volunteer that day? She nodded slowly. I thought he was donating money. What did he tell you? That the school needed extra help. She looked down. I believed him. I closed my eyes. Another memory surfaced. Small. Blurred. During cleanup, I'd been looking for Olivia. One of my students had asked, Miss Rachel, why is your friend carrying boxes into the office? At the time, I'd assumed they were supplies. I never questioned it. I opened my eyes. Detective. There were boxes. He looked up. What kind of boxes? Donation boxes. The money. Hayes' expression changed instantly. He turned to the technician. Pull every photograph from the fundraiser. Every single one. Hundreds of images began appearing across the large monitor. Children painting faces. Parents buying raffle tickets. Teachers grilling hamburgers. Nothing unusual. Then, image 143 appeared. The room froze. There was Olivia, carrying one of the locked donation boxes, walking toward the administration building. Right behind her, Victor Lang, holding the door open. Neither of them looked at the camera. They didn't even know the picture existed. Olivia covered her mouth. I don't remember that. Hayes answered quietly. You didn't think it mattered. She looked at the screen again, then whispered, Oh God. I carried it for him. For the first time, the entire puzzle shifted. Victor hadn't targeted Rachel because of one photograph. He'd targeted her because her camera had accidentally documented the entire chain of events. Not one crime. A sequence. Enough to rebuild everything. And if Rachel remembered where the rest of those photographs had gone, Victor's carefully protected reputation could collapse. Just then, Hayes' phone rang. He answered immediately. No one in the room moved. We watched his face. His expression hardened. Slowly, he lowered the phone, then looked directly at me. Rachel. We've located Ethan. Olivia shot to her feet. Is he okay? Hayes took a long breath. He's alive. A wave of relief washed over the room. Then Hayes finished the sentence. But he says Victor gave him a message. Olivia's face turned white. What message? Hayes looked at me, then repeated Ethan's exact words. Victor said, Tell Rachel to stop looking for the pictures. She already has everything she needs. She just doesn't remember where she hid it. The room fell silent. Because if Victor believed I had hidden the missing evidence, then somewhere, before I disappeared, I'd hidden something even I couldn't remember. The room stayed silent long after Hayes repeated Ethan's message. She already has everything she needs. She just doesn't remember where she hid it. I stared at the evidence board. Victor believed I had something important enough to destroy my life over. But I couldn't remember hiding anything. Hayes picked up a marker. He drew one straight line across the whiteboard. At one end he wrote, fundraiser. The other, cabin. Then he turned toward me. Forget Victor. Forget Olivia. Forget the attack. I want you to think like a teacher. I frowned. What do you mean? When you finished taking photographs, what did you always do first? I closed my eyes. My classroom. Friday afternoon. 23 students running toward the buses. The principal asking for newsletter pictures. My old laptop. A blue external hard drive. Then, came back. Not all at once. Just one small memory. I never edited photos directly from my camera. Hayes nodded. Go on. I copied everything first. Where? My hard drive. The room became very quiet. Hayes didn't smile. He simply asked, Where is it now? I searched my memory. Home. School. No, neither felt right. Then another memory surfaced. The Friday before the fundraiser. My classroom computer had crashed. I'd taken the hard drive home to finish the newsletter. After that, I never brought it back. Olivia slowly looked up. It's still in your house. I turned toward her. No. I would have found it. She shook her head. You wouldn't. You always hid it. I frowned. Hid it? She nodded. You were terrified one of your students would knock it off your desk. You joked that nobody would ever think to look. Then she stopped talking. Her eyes widened. Oh my God. Hayes leaned forward. Where? Olivia whispered. The old cookie jar. I laughed. Not because it was funny, because suddenly, I remembered. The cookie jar. A ceramic one shaped like an apple. It sat on top of my kitchen cabinets. Completely empty. I kept the hard drive inside because it was the last place a curious child would ever look. 40 minutes later, we unlocked the front door of my house. It still smelled like dust and old coffee. Everything was exactly as I'd left it after the break-in. Drawers open. Books scattered. Closet doors hanging open. Victor's people had searched every obvious place. Desk. Office. Bedroom. They never touched the kitchen decorations. Hayes carefully lifted the ceramic apple. Felt heavier than it should. He removed the lid. Reached inside. Then looked at me. Without saying a word, he placed a blue external hard drive into my hand. The digital forensics lab worked through the night. Thousands of photographs filled the screen. Every classroom. Every fundraiser booth. Every volunteer. Every donation. Every smile. Nothing unusual. Until image number 386. Richard Collins. Victor Lang. Olivia. And a fourth person. Nobody recognized him. Not me. Not Olivia. Not even Hayes. The man wore an expensive navy suit. Silver cufflinks. No name tag. He was shaking Richard's hand. With his free hand, he quietly slid the black ledger into Richard's briefcase. Hayes frowned. Who is he? The technician enlarged the photograph. Then another. Then another. The same man appeared in 7 different images. Always in the background. Always avoiding the camera. Yet somehow, Rachel's camera had caught him every time. The technician typed quickly. Running facial recognition against public records. The loading bar crawled across the screen. 10%. 30. 60. 99. Then, a name appeared. The room froze. Not because we recognized it. Because Hayes did. He leaned back slowly. His face drained of color. No. He whispered. It can't be. I looked at him. You know him. Hayes nodded once. Barely. Then quietly answered. He's not Victor's partner. Long pause. He's Victor's attorney. The room fell silent. Hayes stared at the screen. Then said something that changed the entire investigation. If his lawyer was there. This wasn't just theft. This was planned from the beginning. Before anyone could speak, the technician gasped. Detective. Hayes turned. What is it? The technician pointed to the bottom corner of the last photograph. Zoomed in. Almost hidden behind a row of children, stood someone none of us had noticed before. A woman. Holding up her phone. Taking a picture of the exact same exchange. Hayes whispered. She's another witness. I shook my head slowly. No. As the image sharpened, I recognized her. It wasn't another witness. It was the school principal. And if she had taken that picture too, then she'd known the truth. For months. The room went silent. Every eye stayed fixed on the enlarged photograph. The woman holding up her phone was Principal Linda Morrison. I looked at Detective Hayes. No. She wouldn't hide something like this. Hayes didn't answer. Instead, he quietly picked up his phone. Find Principal Morrison. Now. 45 minutes later. We pulled into the parking lot of Lincoln Elementary. The school looked exactly the way I remembered. Children were laughing on the playground. Parents waited outside the front entrance. For a moment, it almost felt normal. Until I noticed the police cars. Principal Morrison was waiting inside her office. The moment she saw me, she burst into tears. She covered her mouth with both hands. Rachel. Oh my God. I thought. She couldn't finish the sentence. I studied her face. This wasn't the expression of someone caught. It was the expression of someone carrying guilt. Hayes placed the recovered photograph on her desk. Linda, did you take this picture? She looked down, closed her eyes, then nodded. Yes. Hayes asked the question we all needed answered. Where is it? Her shoulders trembled. I gave it to the police. The room became silent. Hayes frowned. No, you didn't. I reviewed every photograph submitted with this case. That one wasn't there. She slowly opened a desk drawer. Inside sat an old cell phone. She stared at it for several seconds before speaking. I was going to. But the morning after Richard disappeared, I received a phone call. She picked up the phone with shaking hands. He knew exactly what picture I'd taken. He described my husband, my daughter, my grandson. He told me, if I ever gave that photograph to anyone, my family would disappear too. I felt my stomach tighten. Victor. She nodded. I deleted the photograph from my phone. Another pause. But I couldn't bring myself to throw the phone away. So I locked it in my desk. For 6 months, the technician carefully connected the phone to a forensic computer. Everyone watched the progress bar. 5%, 20, 40. Then, the deleted files appeared. There it was. The original image. Much clearer than mine. Richard. Victor. The attorney. And something we hadn't seen before. The black ledger was open. One page was visible. Not enough to read everything, but enough to make out several names. Olivia looked at the screen. Her knees gave out. I never accepted money. Hayes looked closer. No. He pointed to the page. It isn't a payment. It's a debt. Victor hadn't been paying Olivia. He'd been documenting every dollar her family supposedly owed. The debt had never been real. It had been a leash. One he tightened whenever he needed control. Then Hayes noticed another name. He leaned closer. My heart started pounding. At the very bottom of the page was mine. Rachel Bennett. Beside my name, only 2 handwritten words. Unaware witness. The room fell completely silent. Everything finally made sense. Victor hadn't hated me. He barely knew me. To him, I wasn't a person. I was a problem. A teacher who had unknowingly photographed the beginning of a financial crime. Someone who could destroy years of careful planning without even realizing it. Hayes slowly closed the ledger image, then looked at me. Rachel, I think we're finally ready. Ready for what? He answered quietly. To end this. 3 weeks later, the courthouse was full. Reporters lined the hallway. Victor Lang sat at the defense table. Calm. Confident. Exactly as he'd looked in every photograph. Then, the courtroom doors opened. Olivia walked in. She wasn't wearing handcuffs. She wasn't looking at Victor. She was looking at me. Because for the first time in months, she was finally going to tell the truth. And the first sentence out of her mouth would decide whether justice finally won, or whether Victor walked free one last time. The courtroom was silent. No reporters whispered. No cameras flashed. Even Victor Lang sat perfectly still. He looked exactly the way he always had. Calm. Confident. Certain that nothing could touch him. Then the courtroom doors opened. Olivia walked inside. She wasn't wearing handcuffs. She wasn't looking at Victor. She was looking at me. For just a second, our eyes met. Neither of us smiled. Neither of us looked away. 15 years of friendship had led us to this room. She raised her right hand, swore to tell the truth, then took her seat. The prosecutor asked the first question. Miss Carter, why did you tell investigators Rachel Bennett ran away voluntarily? The courtroom became so quiet. I could hear the air conditioner humming. Olivia lowered her head, then finally spoke. Because I was afraid. The prosecutor waited. Afraid of what? She looked toward Victor. For the first time, he wasn't smiling. My father borrowed money from Victor Lang years ago. When my father died, I thought the debt died with him. It didn't. They made me believe I owed everything. Every month. The number got bigger. I worked 2 jobs. I sold my car. I emptied my savings. It was never enough. The prosecutor nodded. And Rachel? Olivia's voice cracked. They told me they only wanted the photographs. They said they wanted to know what she remembered. I believed them. She stopped, closed her eyes. But when Rachel ran into the woods, I realized they had lied to me too. The prosecutor stepped closer. So why didn't you tell the police? Olivia looked at Ethan, sitting quietly beside my parents, then back at the jury. Because before I reached the station, my phone rang. It was Victor. He described my little brother's walk home from school. He told me what backpack he was carrying. He even knew what color shoes he was wearing. She swallowed hard. Then he said, "If Rachel is alive, your brother won't be." I believed him. So I lied. Again. And again. And every lie made the next one easier. Until eventually, I couldn't remember where the truth ended. And my fear began. No one spoke. Not even Victor. For the first time since this nightmare began, I didn't see Olivia as the friend who betrayed me. I saw a frightened woman who had spent years making worse decisions because she never stopped making the first one. Then Detective Hayes took the stand. One by one, he presented the evidence. The restored photographs, the deleted files, the fundraiser timeline, the ledger, the backup drive, the phone records. Each piece alone wasn't enough. Together, they told one story. The truth. Victor's attorney stood, objected, argued, questioned every witness. But the facts never changed. Rachel's photographs proved the meetings. The ledger proved the debts. Olivia's testimony explained the lies. And Principal Morrison's recovered photo connected them all. For the first time, Victor looked uncertain. Then Hayes produced one final document. Financial records recovered after Richard Collins disappeared. Shell companies. Fake charity accounts. Payments routed through businesses Victor secretly controlled. The courtroom fell silent. Victor slowly removed his glasses. His shoulders dropped. He knew. It was over. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. When they returned, no one moved. The foreperson stood. We find the defendant guilty on every count. Wire fraud, money laundering, extortion, witness intimidation, conspiracy. The judge ordered Victor into custody immediately. As deputies led him away, he glanced at Olivia. She didn't look back. For the first time in years, he had no control over her. Olivia later entered a guilty plea to filing false statements and obstructing the investigation. The judge acknowledged that fear had driven many of her choices. But fear didn't erase responsibility. She accepted her sentence without argument. Before she was escorted away, she asked one question. "May I speak to Rachel?" The judge allowed it. She turned toward me. Tears filled her eyes. "I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even think I deserve it." She took a shaky breath. "But there hasn't been a single day that I haven't wished I could go back to that night." I looked at her for a long moment, then quietly answered, "You can't." Another pause. "But you finally told the truth." It wasn't forgiveness. It was the first step toward peace. 3 months later, Lincoln Elementary held another fundraiser. The same playground, the same booths, the same laughter. Only this time, I wasn't taking pictures because I was afraid I'd miss something. I was taking pictures because life had finally moved forward. One of my students ran over and hugged me. "We knew you'd come back, Miss Bennett." I smiled. So did I. A week later, I drove to Blackwood Lake one last time. The cabin still stood quietly among the pines. The forest looked peaceful, almost innocent. I walked to the edge of the trail where everything had changed. From my coat pocket, I took out Olivia's old friendship bracelet, the one she'd given me on my 21st birthday. I placed it gently on a weathered tree stump. The wind rustled through the branches. For a long moment, I simply listened. Then I whispered, "I spent weeks asking why you left me that night." A small tear rolled down my cheek. "Now I know. You were trying to save the wrong person." I turned, walked back toward my car. This time, I never looked behind me. Sometimes, the deepest scars aren't left by strangers. They're left by the people who loved you. But let fear speak louder than loyalty.